In a world buzzing with endless conversations, where every passing second is marked by comparisons and the pressure to meet ideals that seem just out of reach, it's easy to feel as though you're trailing behind. That nagging voice in your head, the one whispering you're not enough, often sneaks in quietly, but manages to leave an echo that lingers far too long. But here's the truth. It's just a voice. It isn't the whole story. It isn't the unchangeable fate you sometimes believe it to be. What if, instead of being weighed down by that voice, you could replace it with one that lifts you higher, a voice that offers comfort and motivation when the world feels heavy? Now, imagine having that internal ally, someone within you cheering you on rather than tearing you down, someone nudging you to keep moving forward even when doubts creep in. Today, we're unlocking lessons rooted in wisdom passed down through time, shaped by Buddhist philosophy. These aren't abstract ideas reserved for meditation retreats or monasteries. They're tools you can grasp in your hands, turn over, and use to transform self-doubt into courage, failure into lessons, and uncertainty into strength. The first step begins with reframing the relationship you have with your inner critic. In Buddhism, thoughts are seen as fleeting, much like clouds drifting across an open sky. They may appear dark and heavy, but they never linger forever. These thoughts do not define who you are. They are merely guests in your mind, shaped by experiences, past encounters, and the voices of others. Yet, it's easy to mistake these clouds for permanent storms, believing their whispers are undeniable truths. Think of that inner critic for a moment. What does it tell you? Maybe it echoes a teacher's words from your childhood, telling you that you weren't good enough. Or perhaps it mirrors the silence that followed your failures, the moments when you felt your worth was diminished. Over time, these external opinions weave themselves into the fabric of your mind, becoming a voice that speaks up whenever you dare to dream or take a risk. But like the clouds that pass overhead, they're not meant to stay. They're not meant to dictate your path, and they don't have to. One of the central teachings of Buddhism is non-identification. If your thoughts are the weather, then you are the vast open sky, untouched, limitless, and free. Those dark clouds may bring storms, but they are not the sky itself. They drift in and out, and once you recognize this, the power they hold over you begins to diminish. They're just passing phenomena. That's all they've ever been. But understanding this isn't enough. It's one thing to grasp the impermanence of thoughts intellectually, and quite another to live by it. This is where mindfulness comes in, the bridge between knowing and being. Through meditation, you learn the art of observation. You don't run from thoughts and you don't chase them either. Instead, you sit with them, noticing their presence without being consumed. When the thought, "I'm not good enough," arises, you can label it for what it is, self-doubt, and gently let it pass, much like observing a cloud float by without trying to push it away. The magic happens in that small moment of acknowledgement. The more you practice this, the more you realize how transient your thoughts truly are. And in doing so, you begin to peel away the layers of conditioning that have gripped you for so long. You don't have to force the inner critic into silence. That's not the goal. Instead, you meet it with curiosity, almost as though you're listening to a friend who's come to share their fears. Imagine sitting with that inner voice. Instead of fighting it, ask, "Why do you feel this way?" It may surprise you how much of that negativity comes from past experiences rather than present reality. If you can pinpoint where that voice is coming from, you can begin to unravel it. Maybe it's fear of failure, rejection, or disappointment. Or maybe it's a deep-seated belief that success isn't meant for you. But beliefs can be reshaped and fears can be soothed. When you challenge these internal narratives, you give yourself a chance to rewrite the script. The next time that thought pops up, instead of thinking, "I'll never succeed," you can gently ask yourself, "What if I do?" It's a small shift, but it's powerful. With time, those questions become second nature, replacing the harsh self-talk that once held you back. It's in the small, consistent actions that transformation begins. When you face challenges and that familiar voice of doubt rises within you, don't let it paralyze you. Take one step forward, no matter how small. Each step becomes a testament to your resilience, evidence that you can face uncertainty and still move forward. Failure doesn't become a wall, but a stepping stone toward growth. And as you accumulate these moments of courage, that inner critic grows quieter, realizing it no longer holds the same power. Buddhism teaches that even worry and regret are temporary. They're constructs of the mind, often shaped by what has been or what could be. But the present is where your strength lies. When you root yourself in the now, you break free from the cycles of what if and if only. You reclaim the power to act, to change, and to grow. This journey isn't about eliminating self-doubt entirely. It's about learning to coexist with it, to understand it without letting it control you. When you treat your inner critic with compassion, it becomes less of an enemy and more of a signal. Sometimes, it even points you in the direction of growth, highlighting areas where you can improve. But it's up to you to decide whether that voice will be a barrier or a guide. Self-compassion is a key part of this transformation. Many of us are quick to offer kind words to a friend in need, but struggle to extend that same kindness inward. Through practices like loving-kindness meditation, you remind yourself that you are worthy of the same warmth you give to others. It might feel uncomfortable at first, as though that inner critic is rejecting the notion of self-love. But with time, it softens. Each act of self-compassion builds a foundation of resilience. Every time you pause, breathe, and choose to respond with kindness instead of criticism, you're reshaping your mind. The once loud and persistent voice of doubt begins to fade, replaced by a gentler, more supportive inner dialogue. And when self-doubt inevitably returns, as it will during moments of stress, you'll be ready. You'll recognize it for what it is, just another passing cloud. It's important to remember that this isn't a sprint, but a lifelong process. There will be setbacks, moments when the storm feels overwhelming. But even then, the awareness that you're in the midst of a storm is a victory. It means you're aware, present, and capable of weathering it. Just as the sky remains after the storm passes, so do you. And in that vast, limitless expanse of your being, there's room for growth, for healing, and for the life you've always been capable of creating. As you navigate through this journey of self-reflection and understanding, another layer begins to reveal itself: the stories you tell yourself about your worth, potential, and purpose. These stories are woven into your mind from the threads of childhood memories, societal expectations, and personal failures. But here's the liberating truth: stories can be rewritten. The narrative you've been living isn't set in stone, and with awareness, you hold the pen to craft a new version of yourself. Think back to a moment when you felt the sting of failure. Maybe it was a rejection from a job, a broken relationship, or a dream that didn't go as planned. Often we assign meaning to these experiences that extend far beyond the event itself. I failed this, therefore I am a failure. This mental leap transforms isolated incidents into defining traits, and over time, these self-definitions become the walls of an invisible prison. But Buddhism teaches that attachment to these mental constructs is the root of suffering. And if suffering is rooted in attachment, freedom lies in letting go. This doesn't mean ignoring your pain or pretending that challenges never happened. Quite the opposite. It's about seeing them for what they truly are: experiences that helped you grow, moments that shaped you but do not define you. Just as clouds pass across the sky, so do the labels you attach to yourself. You don't have to carry them forever. One of the most profound teachings of Buddhism revolves around the concept of impermanence, or anicca. Everything is in a constant state of change: the seasons, your emotions, even your very cells. Nothing remains static. And when you embrace this truth, you begin to see that the struggles you face are temporary. Even the deepest heartaches and the heaviest burdens are not eternal. They pass, just as the storm gives way to a calm breeze. But here's the challenge: the mind resists change. It clings to familiarity, even when that familiarity brings pain. Have you ever noticed how your mind tends to replay the same negative thoughts, as if on an endless loop? That's because the mind finds comfort in repetition, even when it knows that repetition is harmful. Breaking free from this cycle requires deliberate effort, a conscious decision to disrupt the loop and create space for new perspectives. This is where mindfulness becomes more than just a practice. It becomes a way of living. When you observe your thoughts without judgment, you create a gap between yourself and the narrative running in your head. In that gap, you find freedom. Imagine standing on the shore of a vast ocean. The waves crash at your feet, but you're not pulled under. You're simply observing, grounded, aware that the waves will come and go. This is the essence of mindfulness. When a thought arises, "I'm not capable," "I'll never succeed," or "I'm not worthy," instead of getting swept away by it, you acknowledge it with gentle curiosity. Ah, there's that thought again. You don't fight it, and you don't feed it. You let it be. Over time, you realize that these thoughts have less power than you once believed. They're not anchors. They're passing ripples. And as you cultivate this awareness, something incredible begins to happen. The inner voice that once seemed so loud starts to lose its grip. You learn to respond to it with compassion, as you would to a child who's afraid of the dark. You don't scold yourself for feeling doubt or fear. Instead, you offer reassurance. It's okay to feel this way, but this feeling isn't permanent. This self-compassion is transformative. Many people believe that being hard on themselves is the key to success, that self-criticism will push them to improve. But research, as well as centuries of wisdom, suggests the opposite. Self-compassion isn't a weakness. It's a source of resilience. When you treat yourself with kindness, you create an internal environment where growth becomes possible. You give yourself permission to learn, to fail, and to try again without the weight of shame holding you back. Think of a plant struggling to grow in poor soil. No amount of sunlight or water will help if the soil itself is hostile. But enrich the soil, and that same plant will thrive. Your mind is no different. The way you speak to yourself, the inner dialogue you maintain, determines the environment in which your potential can flourish. Harsh criticism depletes the soil, while self-compassion enriches it. In Buddhism, this practice of self-compassion is often cultivated through loving-kindness meditation, or metta. You begin by offering kind wishes to yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering. At first, it may feel strange or even uncomfortable. Your inner critic might resist, questioning whether you deserve such kindness. But with time, the practice softens those internal barriers. You start to believe the words you're saying. And as you extend compassion to yourself, you naturally extend it to others, creating a ripple effect that transforms your relationships and interactions. Imagine standing in front of a mirror and seeing not just your reflection, but the culmination of every experience, challenge, and triumph that brought you to this moment. There's strength in those eyes staring back at you. There's wisdom in every scar and lesson learned. You're not the same person you were a year ago or even yesterday. You're evolving, growing, shedding old layers to make room for new ones. But growth doesn't mean constant progress. There will be setbacks, days when self-doubt feels overwhelming, and moments when you question whether you're capable of change. On those days, remind yourself that even the tallest trees experience seasons of dormancy. Their growth isn't linear, and neither is yours. What matters is that you keep nurturing the soil, even when the surface shows no visible signs of progress. Buddhism also teaches that joy can be found in the small, ordinary moments of life. You don't have to wait for grand achievements to feel a sense of fulfillment. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of laughter, the feeling of breath filling your lungs. These are moments of grace, reminders that life itself is a gift. When you learn to appreciate the present, the grip of self-doubt loosens. You realize that your worth isn't tied to external accomplishments, but to the very fact that you exist. This shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, like the way dawn breaks across the horizon, slowly illuminating the world. But as you continue on this journey, you'll notice a change. The voice that once told you you weren't enough will grow quieter, replaced by a voice that whispers, "You are worthy, you are capable, and you are enough." And when that voice of self-compassion becomes your default, the possibilities are endless. You begin to take risks, not because you're guaranteed success, but because you trust yourself to handle whatever outcome arises. You stop fearing failure because you understand that failure is simply another step in the process of growth. And most importantly, you realize that you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love, success, and happiness. You are, and always have been, enough. As you step deeper into this unfolding journey of self-awareness, you begin to recognize the many masks you've worn throughout life, the roles you've played, the expectations you've tried to meet, and the identities you've constructed in order to feel accepted. They all start to surface, one by one. There's the mask of the overachiever, the one who strives for perfection to feel worthy. There's the mask of the caretaker, who sacrifices their own needs to ensure others are happy. And then there's the mask of invincibility, hiding vulnerability behind a facade of strength. These masks served a purpose once. They were shields, protecting you from the pain of rejection or failure. But over time, what was meant to protect you became a prison. The masks hardened, making it difficult to connect authentically with yourself and others. Buddhism teaches that this attachment to identity is a major source of suffering. When you believe you are only the roles you play, you limit yourself to a fraction of your true potential. But what if you could remove the masks and embrace your authentic self? What if you could stand in your truth without the fear of judgment or failure? This is where liberation begins. The process isn't easy. It requires vulnerability, courage, and the willingness to confront the parts of yourself you've buried. But within that confrontation lies the seed of transformation. Think about the stories you've told yourself about who you are. Perhaps you've believed you're not creative because someone criticized your art as a child. Or maybe you've convinced yourself you're not a leader because you once hesitated in a moment of decision. These stories become self-fulfilling prophecies, shaping the way you view your potential. But what if those stories aren't true? What if they're just narratives you've inherited and can now rewrite? Buddhism invites you to see beyond the surface of these stories. Instead of identifying with them, observe them as passing clouds in the sky of your mind. They're there, but they don't define the sky itself. When you detach from the stories, you create space for new possibilities. You begin to see yourself as fluid, capable of growth and change, rather than as a fixed character trapped by past experiences. Meditation can be a powerful tool in this process. As you sit in stillness, you become aware of the mental chatter, the inner dialogue that often goes unnoticed in the busyness of daily life. At first, the mind resists, Thoughts race, memories resurface, and the urge to distract yourself can feel overwhelming. But if you stay with it, something magical happens. The noise begins to settle, like sediment sinking to the bottom of a jar of muddy water. What remains is clarity, a deeper connection to the present moment, and a glimpse of your true nature beyond the masks. In this state of presence, you realize that you don't need to strive to be someone else or achieve external validation to feel complete. You already possess everything you need within you. The external world may tell you otherwise. It may push you to chase status, success, and approval. But when you quiet the external noise, you discover that true fulfillment comes from within. Imagine standing in a forest, surrounded by towering trees and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. The forest doesn't compete with itself. Each tree grows at its own pace, its roots deepening naturally without the need for comparison. The tallest tree doesn't diminish the worth of the smallest sapling, and just like the forest, you are enough as you are. You don't need to be the tallest, the fastest, or the most accomplished to be worthy of love and belonging. But society often teaches us the opposite. From a young age, we're conditioned to believe that our worth is tied to our achievements. We're praised for good grades, promotions, and milestones, while failures are often met with disappointment or criticism. Over time, this conditioning creates a mindset where failure is seen as a personal flaw rather than an opportunity for growth. But Buddhism teaches that failure is not the end of the journey. It's an integral part of it. Every failure carries a lesson, and every setback is a stepping stone toward growth. When you shift your perspective and see failure as feedback rather than defeat, you free yourself from the fear of trying. Think of the great inventors, artists, and leaders throughout history. Their successes were built on a foundation of failures, each one teaching them something valuable. Without those failures, they wouldn't have achieved greatness. This understanding can transform the way you approach challenges. Instead of avoiding risks to protect yourself from failure, you embrace them as opportunities to learn. When you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes, you open yourself up to experiences that can lead to profound growth. You become resilient, not because you never fall, but because you know how to rise each time you do. One of the key teachings of Buddhism is the concept of non-attachment. This doesn't mean you should never care or have desires. It means you don't cling to outcomes or let them define your sense of self. Non-attachment allows you to pursue your goals with passion while accepting whatever outcome arises. If you succeed, you celebrate without becoming attached to the success. If you fail, you learn without internalizing the failure as a reflection of your worth. Imagine holding a butterfly in your hand. If you grip it too tightly, you risk crushing its delicate wings. But if you hold it gently, it can rest peacefully before flying away. Non-attachment is like holding life with a gentle grip. You appreciate what you have, but you don't hold on so tightly that you create suffering when things inevitably change. This perspective can also transform your relationships. Often, we attach expectations to others, believing that their actions should align with our desires. When they don't, we feel disappointment, anger, or betrayal. But when you release those expectations and allow others to be who they are, you free yourself from unnecessary suffering. You realize that love isn't about control or possession, it's about acceptance and compassion. As you walk this path, you begin to see that the most important relationship you have is the one with yourself. The way you treat yourself sets the tone for how you experience the world. If you're harsh and unforgiving toward yourself, that inner turmoil will manifest in your external life. But if you cultivate kindness and understanding, you create a foundation of peace that extends beyond you. You become like a tree rooted deeply in the earth, steady and unshaken by the storms of life. The winds may howl and the rain may pour, but your roots hold strong, You know that storms pass, and after the rain, the sun will shine again. And so, the journey continues, not as a quest for perfection, but as a path toward wholeness. You're not here to become someone else. You're here to rediscover the essence of who you've always been. The veil of wisdom reminds you that this journey isn't about reaching a destination, but embracing the process itself. Every step, every stumble, and every moment of doubt is a part of the unfolding story of your growth. The story is yours to write, and with each passing day, you're writing a narrative that reflects not just who you were, but who you're becoming. The possibilities are endless. The path to awakening is not a straight line. It curves, twists, and sometimes loops back to places you thought you'd left behind. This can be frustrating, especially when you believe you've made progress, only to find yourself confronting the same fears and doubts you thought you had overcome. But the truth is, this repetition is part of the process. Growth is not about never facing the same challenges again. It's about facing them with a deeper awareness each time. Think of a musician learning to play a complex piece of music. They don't perfect it on the first try. They practice, make mistakes, and refine their technique with each attempt. Over time, the notes that once felt impossible to play become second nature. In the same way, the lessons you learn on the path to self-discovery require practice and patience. There will be moments when you feel stuck, but even in those moments, you're growing in ways you might not yet see. One of the most challenging aspects of this journey is confronting your shadow, the parts of yourself you've denied or suppressed because they're uncomfortable to face. The shadow holds your fears, insecurities, and past wounds, but it also holds untapped potential. By bringing the shadow into the light of awareness, you integrate it into your wholeness. You realize that even the parts of yourself you once rejected have something valuable to teach you. Buddhism encourages you to approach your shadow with compassion rather than judgment. Instead of criticizing yourself for having fears or insecurities, you treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer a friend. Imagine a child who is scared of the dark. You wouldn't scold the child for being afraid. You would comfort them and help them feel safe. In the same way, you can comfort your inner child, who may still carry the wounds of past experiences. As you heal these wounds, you begin to let go of the emotional baggage that weighs you down. Forgiveness becomes a key part of this process, not just forgiveness of others, but forgiveness of yourself. Perhaps you've been holding on to guilt or shame for mistakes you've made, but carrying that weight doesn't serve you. It only keeps you stuck in the past. Forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of resentment and regret.